So you look at the landscape of producers and you think, damn, I'm competing with 500,000. The easiest thing to do is make yourself available to customers. Now you've just cut that number down from 500,000 to 250,000. What's going down? It's the Music Entrepreneur Club podcast, I should add. It's DJ Payne 1. I'm here with Dame Ritter and Erinn Knight, and we are ready to rant. We are ready to, what was the feedback we got from your former artist, Dame? We're ready to be super negative and not help anybody or something to that effect.
Well, Demrick is not, but I mean, I've helped him out a lot, but I've never said he was my artist. But I mean, I think he does have a point. A lot of our posts are like, hey, you need to get your shit together, or hey, it does seem like doom and gloom. Like, but I disagree, because we have I disagree from the standpoint of like, we have a ton of positivity on the page too. I just think it's, from my standpoint, it's the reality of the music business. Some of this shit is just doom and gloom. Like, that's just is what it is. And sometimes it's discouraging to hear, but I'm not going to be overly optimistic when, the chances of success are small. I want to put the reality of the music industry on the table, how I see it at least. And, sometimes it's negative, but I think he has a point because, and we've said this on the podcast, we'll pick out the most negative comment in YouTube and then talk about it for 15 minutes. Like, and I've said, like, I wanted to stop doing that. So I think he kind of has a point, but he's definitely cherry picking posts because I think we have positivity on the page.
Well, let me submit this then. I wouldn't characterize our posts as doom and gloom or negative in the sense that they are discouraging. If I go to a gym, right, and I say, I really need to lose weight, I'm morbidly obese, and the gym says, yeah, you're at risk of all of these life-threatening illnesses, that's a negative statement. It's a true statement, but it's a negative statement nonetheless. Do I need to know that? Absolutely, because that's going to motivate me to do better. If I start working out and my form is terrible and they say, hey, that's terrible form, you're going to injure yourself. That's also a negative statement because they're telling me something that I've done wrong. So now we're stacking all these things that I'm doing wrong. Do I run out of there and say, oh my God, they're just so mean and it's all about negativity? No, they're helping me. They're giving me a negative statement. They're commenting on something negative for instructive purposes. I was giving the example of rappers who are making mistakes by not connecting with their fans. If I had just gone in front of the camera and said rappers are trash and they're messing up, period, end of statement, I would say, yeah, that's pretty negative content. But if I said rappers shouldn't be leaving because this is what they should be doing and here's why, I think that's a very different form of communicating.
But it's, so here's a good example. Like, you have a tendency to write your titles like this. You're going to kill your career if you do this. You're going to fuck up if you do this. As opposed to saying,
I've never used the F word in any of my titles.
Well, I mean, but it's always like, it's pretty general too. Like, I've said something to you about that as well. So it's like, you could say that, or you can say, grow your email list by staying after shows, right? Or so I'm not saying that you have to change it, but I'm saying that's what that's what he's responding to. It's in terms of,
but let's be real. Dave, if we were to make grow your email list the headliner, nobody would click on the video. Like, we're also marketers. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so, and I get the negative, but I agree. People want to be coddled. When I look at the MEC page, even before I was part of the MEC, I was like, this is good information, great information. And that's all I saw. I never saw it as framed as negative until I was in the comments like, what do you want from us at this point? Do you know what I'm saying? I, for one, know that I'm encouraging people. And I think it's weird that people either, if you're succeeding in the business, we're telling the truth. If you're not succeeding in the business, maybe take some of what we're saying, don't internalize it and make it personal and run from there. And I'm not trying to, I get it, because I don't think everything should be in a negative package, but I think that's an unfair assessment of what we have to offer.
I'm not saying anybody needs to change. I'm just saying there is a point to some of our posts, and you can make something. I think you can make a headline just as appealing, and people still click on it. That's all I'm.
You absolutely can, and you will still get negative feedback. I mean,
I'm not.
That's what's funny to me.
That's not my goal, because I know that's not possible to not get a negative comment. Right.
No, but my point is you just can't ever create content in a way that will not elicit negative feedback. I mean, my post about my best friend and how proud I was of him elicited a ton of negative feedback. It elicited a ton of positive feedback, and I think for the most part, all of our content receives positive comments overwhelmingly. Regardless, someone's going to think it's negative, even if 1,000 other people think it's helpful. I'm looking at it as that's their problem more than anything. They're interpreting it a certain way. I mean, honestly, if it's helpful, it's helpful. And if the minority of viewers feel that it's an affront to their identities, then that's an affront to their identities, not me insulting them, not Dame or Erinn insulting them, or none of us going out of our way to do anything negative or harmful.
But I'm not saying you're going out of your way to do anything harmful or negative. All I'm saying is we have control over, that's part of emotional intelligence, right? Like, you understand that there's a gap between what you're trying to say and what people are receiving. And emotional intelligence is about first recognizing there's a gap and having the ability to close that gap if you think it is worth your time. So with some of the way we talk, some of the way we write headlines, we have the ability to close that gap with some people. Now we can say, this is our style, this is what we do, this is our brand, and we're not changing nothing. And that's completely fine if that's where we stand, because we know in our hearts we're trying to do something positive. We don't get paid a lot of money to do this. So it is a passion project. People should understand that. But if we want to change how we communicate to connect with a few more people, then we say, okay, we can make a few changes here, there. That's all I'm saying.
More positive headlines loading, y'all.
Is the music business a place in which there's a lot of hand-holding and a lot of leeway when it comes to, I guess, unmotivated folks or hypersensitive folks? I would argue not. And I personally would feel like I would be doing my viewers a disservice if I'm coddling them through my content.
But it's not about coddling. It's just about.
No, sometimes I do think that is because if it's
I don't think.
I'm sorry for talking over you.
I don't think it's coddling. I just think it's. We all learn this as leaders. If I would have communicated it a little differently, like Funk Volume would have, it doesn't mean I won't go back and say I was wrong. I was wrong about how I handled things. I think I handled things like a normal human being would. But if I did something a little differently, maybe Funk Volume would still exist today. So it's not about necessarily being right or wrong. It's just about growing and developing as a communicator. That's all.
That I agree with. I definitely respect that. And I don't think me having a hardline approach is a positive thing, or me not taking feedback or criticism is a positive thing. I definitely take it into consideration. For me, it's a matter of discerning negative content that has an impact versus something more subjective. Because again, as I said, I can post the most positive post ever and still get negative feedback. So when I post, hey, I'm so proud of my best friend, and someone's like, fuck your best friend. Why are you putting him on and not me? Then it's like, what could I have done better in that situation? Nothing.
But that post is not, the feedback is not this post is negative. The feedback is something different, right?
The feedback was this post is deceptive. You're lying to people by making it seem like the music business is so easy that even your best friend can just do it in a year. Because I said my best friend quit his job a year ago and now he's #1 on Billboard. people were upset about that. They said I was lying. I was deceiving the young. I swear to you, these are all pieces of feedback that I received. So
your needle in a haystack feedback. It's like you went down 10,000 comments and picked these ones.
no, but I didn't get 10,000 comments.
There might have just been a weirdo trolling you. Like,
no, it was multiple people. Is it a weirdo? Sure. But the same amount of negative, this is what I'm saying, Dave. The same amount of negative comments that I get on a positive post is about the same amount of negative posts I get on what Demrick would consider a negative post. So ultimately, I'm not insulting anyone on a personal level. I'm not going on and say, yo, rappers, you're trash. I'm saying, rappers, this is a mistake that you're making. Is it a mistake? Sure. Could I say it differently? Hey guys, here's something you maybe want to consider. Maybe that's just not the way.
Makes it sound weird.
Yeah, but that's not the way I talk, and that's not the way I prefer to be spoken to.
Well, they don't change. I'm just telling you, they don't change. Let's get to your topic, man.
No, I want to talk about what you were bringing up, because that was a perfect segue into my little side note.
So Dan Runcie recently wrote an article. Dan Runcie is the founder of Trapital. He writes, pretty high level stuff about the music industry. He dives into things. He's data driven. I think he has an MBA. So everything he writes, he tries to support with data and research. But I just found it interesting because in the article, he's comparing, at least from a percentage wise, like the likelihood of success in different industries that are sexy. And, any sexy industry or that people want to do, whether it's acting or being a sports player or being a writer or something like that, there's obviously a lot of competition, a lot of demand for those roles. So it's going to be very low percentage of folks that actually become successful, especially like largely successful. So, he compared success in the music industry, because I think basically what he was saying was, there's 7 million artists on Spotify, because, and we'll talk about that too, but there's 7 million artists on Spotify, and there's like, whatever the number is, I think it was 13,000 artists that are making at least $50,000 on Spotify alone, and that percentage came out to be something like 0.2% or something like that, or maybe 0.02%. But anyway, in comparing it to people that are playing,
made how much money though? Can you give the dollar amount?
50,000 just on Spotify. So my assumption is if you can make 50,000 just on Spotify, you at least have a 6-figure revenue generating business. You should, with the other streaming platforms, with publishing, with merch, you should have a pretty healthy business if you're doing 50,000 alone just on Spotify. But then he compared it to like, people that are playing organized soccer at amateur levels around the world. Obviously, soccer being the most popular sport in the world, I believe, the chances of playing professionally are much smaller to try to play soccer. Or likewise, if you want to be a writer, he put up the numbers of, people that were making, actually, let me look at the tweet again. So he says, best-selling author in the world, James Patterson, earns nearly $100 million annually, while the average author struggles to recoup $10,000 on a book advance. So I knew this already. It's something that I, say very often. I think streaming gets a worse rap than it actually deserves. I think it's actually created more independent artists that have been able to live. Now, songwriters, that's another conversation that I think is valid. So it's not a perfect solution to the music industry. It definitely needs some work, but, especially compared to other things that are sexy, I think we don't hear about these other lanes because artists are louder. They have more of a voice on social media. So we hear the complaints, the struggle, the frustration of pursuing music as a career. So I like seeing the data support what I've always felt. And I don't want to necessarily discourage people, but again, it's the reality of what this isn't a kumbaya industry where everybody's going to be successful. Very small percentage of people are going to be successful. So I think seeing this data is important. I think it's helpful. So shout out to Dan Runcie for writing the article. Check it out, trapital.co, I believe, or just Google Trapital. The Spotify article is interesting because I think they've been a net positive to the music industry. Just my opinion.
I think that article is very
I already
negative.
know the direction you're going in. I'm with you.
No, I was just going to say that's a very negative article because it just, I'm kidding. And it's not. And I love that he actually quantified things because you're absolutely, well, the data is revealing in the sense that, and we've talked about this, right? Haven't people made the statement that the music business is the worst industry on the planet? And sometimes you do look at the practices in the business and think, no other business parallels this. I mean, just think about a regular traditional job. If they were withholding your salary from you or your wages from you for months on end, you probably would stop showing up. But this consistently happens in the music business when you're dealing with a label trying to hunt down an advance, or you wait, 9 months for your royalties to kick in. So it's unique in a lot of ways and not always positive ways, but ultimately there's far more of a middle class in the music industry than any of these other kind of luxury industries, professional sports especially. I mean, if you were an MMA fighter or a football player or any kind of woman in athletics, period, you really don't have shit unless you're at the top. You really have very few options to support yourself. It's like you're either making nothing and you're struggling, or you're a multimillionaire. There's
the in between for amateurs. Well, no, the in between for professional sports would be to play overseas. Right. There's a lot of opportunities, especially for casted hoop. There's a lot of opportunities to play and depending on where you end up overseas, that you can actually be very wealthy, a millionaire plus, playing in certain cities, or you can be playing in a random city that doesn't pay you much, right? And there's a new and like Ball is Life, these other platforms has created a basketball influencer option. Right. So now there's a basketball influencer option that if you have, a unique set of skills and a personality, you can grow an audience online. So there are, it isn't like make billions or not. There definitely is some middle class options, but for the most part, I think music has more of them that you can have more control over.
Yeah, I mean, you can be a musician. You don't have to necessarily be an influencer. I think once we start tacking influencer onto a title, we kind of transform what the fundamental reason for that success is. So you can be a basketball influencer, but are you more of an influencer and that's what's generating your money? Or is it because you are a basketball player? You know what I mean? And there are so many different kinds of sports. Well, and an influencer can feed into what your main passion is, obviously.
But I feel like sports commentators essentially are the original influencers. Like Michael Strahan has made more becoming an international personality than he did being a top footballer in the world. So yeah. I do get that, but I also feel like influencer doesn't necessarily mean Instagram or TikTok.
I think with the Ball is Life, it probably does, but and that's what I'm saying. Like there are more options now. That space is opening up. But I don't know if there are bobsled influencers. There probably are. There's an influencer for everything, but there are so many different sports out there, and there's a finite of positions even overseas compared to music. You can make music and go viral and have a career from Fargo. You know what I mean? And you can't necessarily do the same thing with athletics. Maybe not yet. Maybe that will change because we could never think of, back 20 years ago, musicians weren't, and especially beat makers, you couldn't be making beats in the middle of nowhere 20 years ago and expect any kind of success. And now there are, people that are producing from Drake. Does anyone know where Cardo Got Wings is from? It's not LA, it's not New York, it's not Atlanta. So you now have those options that weren't present. So maybe other industries are going to follow suit and change. But for now, anytime we're confronted with I guess the assertion that the music industry is the worst of them all, I think intuitively we know better, given that we've been doing it for a long time.
But I do kind of have a little bit of a counterpoint to that. Like in the book world, typically you won't get an agent or a manager until you have discernible value and there's deals in place. But in the music industry, there's an infrastructure where not only is the artist not getting paid, but the agents, the managers, do you know what I'm saying? It's a trickle down effect, the songwriters, the producers. So even though I do feel like what you're saying is 2% are making probably six figures, I still feel like
0.02%.
0.02%. Yeah, you're right. It's definitely not 2%. 0.02% are making a living.
My bad. 0.2%. Sorry.
0.2% are making a living, or more than a living, because most of my artists are around the 30, 40K on Spotify. So we haven't even hit the 50K, but we're still getting, you know what I'm saying? Like we're making most of them six figures or really, really close to it. So I feel like there are people making a living, but I think that, like, if you look at people like me and you, even Payne, for us to make our living, we couldn't just stick with Payne couldn't just be a beat maker. He had to become an influencer and get into all these different things. Like, you couldn't, even when you were owning the label, you couldn't just own the label. You had to also do the management and the merch and all of those things. And then even now you have your hands in a lot of things. I think that it's hopeful and it's interesting that he highlighted that the music industry is essentially doing better than other industries. But if we look at the pay structure and how so many people rely on the artist making money in order for everybody else to make money, I then feel like it's a little bit different. And it's hard for me to still empathize and be like, yeah, the music industry isn't as bad. I still think.
Yeah, well, one, I don't want to speak for Payne, but I feel like he could probably at this point just make and I could have made a living just as a label owner at some point. Like, we definitely got to a point where I could have just picked one role and, been fine. But I would also in this data, because he's using 7 million as the number. I wouldn't use 7 million as the number, right? Because the ease of distribution has allowed your mom and dad to put a song on Spotify. So they're not so I would try to find the number of like artists taking it seriously. And I don't know how you're going to define seriously, maybe by number of releases a year. I have no idea. But that number is not 7 million. I would guess, this is just a guess, I don't even care to do the research. This is just based off of what I see in terms of artists that are regularly releasing music, artists that are promoting themselves on social media, artists that are learning the business. If you're doing those things, and artists that are networking, surrounding themselves with good people, I would imagine that if you're doing those things, you're probably competing with 1 million. All right, I think you can chop off.
That's a number I had in my head.
I think you could chop off. So if you're, that increases, I can't do the math in my head, that probably increases your percent of, it probably does go to 1%, or above that. It's probably it's actually between 1 or 2%. If that is the real number that you're really competing against, is the million that are really taking it serious. And that's why it's so important to learn the business. Tap into our sessions Monday, Thursday, 12 p.m. Pacific, because that's 7 million is definitely not the real number. So there's some positivity for people.
For sure.
Well, yeah, and I think that's, I know what I'm trying to say in all of my posts ever, that granted, there's this reality, and the reality is that most of us aren't doing things correctly, or most of us aren't doing enough. Most of us don't know enough. Most of us haven't learned enough. So let's break through that. Here's a negative, but here's the positive. The bad news is it's a challenge. The good news is you can do it. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Just fits in perfectly with what we just spoke about was, and it's more feedback from posts, because again, when I post something positive, I get negative feedback. And when I post something that's a little more direct, I get negative feedback. And most of it's positive. Otherwise, I wouldn't be posting, period. But I think what's telling is when I do post something positive, that I'm getting negative feedback. And the reason I say that is because I think there is this perception that someone may look at the music business and think, okay, I am competing with 7 million people because everyone makes beats, right? Nowadays, everyone makes beats. So you look at the landscape of producers and you think, damn, I'm competing with 1 billion producers, but you're not competing with 1 billion producers. You may be competing with 500,000. And that number seems intimidating, but when you further start breaking down what all of your so-called competition is doing, you realize there are easy ways to beat them. And I shouldn't even use the term beat them because it shouldn't be a competition with other producers. It should be a competition between you and your goals. My point is, say it's between you and 500,000 other producers competing for leases every day. The easiest thing to do is make yourself available to customers. Now you've just cut that number down from 500,000 to 250,000 because half of them aren't replying to their customers quickly. How can you further lower that amount of producers that you're quote unquote competing with? Well, better branding, increased output, adding value through knowledge of the music business. You think all those producers that are selling beats online know the ins and outs of intellectual property law, or can they explain to a rapper who may not know anything about the music business, anything about music theory, counting bars? Can they explain that? Can they provide resources? If you can do that, now you're only competing with maybe 50,000 other producers. And then if you have a unique sound, now you're competing with 20,000 producers. And if you're committed to doing it for the long run and you believe in yourself, now you're competing with, it doesn't matter because you're unstoppable at that point. So what I want to propose, without getting into this kind of new age metaphysical stuff, is just that, you know, and I, judging from the responses I get when I say something positive, like my best friend did this, or producers, you can do this. And then people are like, no, you can't. And there were, when I went live on BeatStars, there was one guy who was just incredibly negative. And what I loved was that all the people in the chat, rather than get reactive and either agree with the negativity or get upset and cuss him out, they just kind of disagreed and said, no, this is what I'm experiencing. And his whole thing was, you know, law of averages. Everything is set up to fail you. You're set up to fail. You realistically speaking, you're not going to be able to make it. My thing is, like, that attitude is the career killer. I don't know any successful producers. I don't know any successful rappers. I don't know successful songwriters or successful managers who go into the game at the very beginning and believe that they're going to fail.
But do you know the likelihood of being alive? You know, like the likelihood of the sperm hitting the proper egg and you being alive, not dying in the womb, not dying from a disease. The likelihood of you being alive is like over 1 in a trillion. So you should be like, I always look at life that way. I'm like, I'm not even supposed to be here, so everything is a miracle. So why would I think that the odds, of course the odds are stacked against me, especially as a Black woman. That just gives me more, that puts wind underneath my sails, because everything that I do is counteracting every statistic that says that I shouldn't be here.
Yeah, and I think that's incredibly encouraging. And I think that should be how we frame our perceived competition or the perceived odds stacked against us in the music business of all things. You know, compared to the other struggles that people deal with, the music business is the least of our worries. It goes back to our original conversation about the whole, you know, these are luxury, sexy careers, right? Not everybody can have those. We know that. So if we want them, the least we can do is believe that we can actually achieve that. The very least we can do. And if not, Well, if we're going into it already with this kind of deficit thinking that we're not good enough, well, maybe that's not really what we want. And there's nothing wrong with that. But am I phrasing this as a positive thing, or how am I doing right now communicating my point?
I think you're just being self-conscious about a few we don't have to change like everything that we do. The only feedback was that some of the posts appear or phrased as negative. That's all. You don't have to now be come on the show and be Barney and start like dancing around and throwing rainbows. Like that's not
how does one throw a rainbow? That's a talent I want to learn.
That does not the correction. So I liked your list of things to do to kind of separate from the pack and lower the amount of people that you're essentially competing with. The other one that I would add is having like really knowing what your lane is, right? Your lane is not everybody in the music industry. Like you should have a particular target audience that you really understand, and that's who you're communicating your message to. That's who you're pinpoint driving your message to, because that also will limit the amount of competition you have, because a lot of people don't understand. A lot of producers are just like, I put my beats out, I put them for everybody. But, I think, Payne, one of the reasons you've been successful is because you have, and you said it too, you have a particular sound, but you know your lane, the soulful sound. And you have the ability to create beats that are not soulful, but I think you've made your home in a particular lane and people come to know you for that. And I think customers appreciate that. I think when artists want a certain sound, they come to you for it. So I think that's another thing that can help producers be more successful. And
I would add one thing to that, because this is what I've been big on this week. Once you find your niche, all you have to do is build credibility with a really small audience, and then you become that person, right? So even this podcast, I was telling the artist this yesterday on a consulting call. He was like, well, how do I build credibility? How do I prove to them that I do this? And I said, you don't. You just have to be yourself. The moment that people see my personality in things, now that creates credibility, because they're like, she seems like a genuine person. I like her personality. She must know what she's talking about. That's how we function in life. The reason that Michael B. Jordan is the biggest actor right now of our generation is because he has the credibility. He has the lifestyle. He's got the celebrity girlfriend. So we assume that he's better and he's more merited based off of the credibility of his life that's around it, and this is not a shot to him. I'm not arguing this or not, but that doesn't mean he's actually the greatest actor. It just means that he is the most credible, so to speak. And I think that if artists are like Payne said, if you're competing with 20,000 people for 7 million artists, now that's a full-time plus living, because they're going to come back for multiple beats, and I think that if you're like, I am the person that you should come to for this, and now I'm going to just work on you liking me, it opens up so many more doors. Like people come to the MEC because aside from the people who say we're always negative, we have real world. One of the comments on my NFT video was, I thought you guys were frauds, but now I believe you. And I think it's because the posture was, I don't get this. Do you know what I'm saying? Instead of like, hey, we know everything about the music industry. I feel like a lot of our posts are like that. We don't get it, but maybe if you don't dig deep. But I think when people can see that you're a real person and that you're actually walking through this and you're not trying to present yourself as the know-it-all, I think some of that humility is a lot of what actually propels a lot of people forward. The credibility within a niche means that you'll always eat.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, and even that paints a far less bleak picture of the music business, because if you're trying to appeal to everybody, that's too much. If you just want to appeal to 100 people starting out, that's a far more realistic goal. And yeah, I think people just psych themselves out because they're not incrementally building their music careers. I think it's just a lot of focusing on the macro rather than the micro. And you're never going to be every artist, even the superstars, are polarizing. They have people who don't like them at all. And partially just because it's in fashion and popular to dislike whoever is popular. So yeah, you can't let that stop you.
So real quickly, I know that we got Erinn's topic, but just a quick, I wanted to just talk about Kanye's post real quick about NFTs. Because he made a post that I'm sure, I know upset a lot of people in the crypto space. He basically said, my focus is on building real products in the real world, real food, real clothes, real shelter. Do not ask me to do a fucking NFT. Yay, ask me later. Do you think that's the setup for a Kanye NFT? Or do you think he's really just past it? I'm sure he hurt a lot of people's feelings in the NFT space, given that he has so much influence. Do you guys think he'll drop an NFT with this new album that's coming up? Or that's because he's kind of wrong in the sense that, NFTs can be very real thing or give you access to very real things. Like, so I'm sure people in the crypto world took offense to how he even phrased the comment of it just not being real.
I think that, for one, he is an insanely gifted marketing genius, right? So if he comes out with an NFT, cool. But even the fact that he wrote it on paper and took a picture of it, genius. You know what I'm saying? He didn't even write a post. He's like, I'm going to make this a physical image, which I felt like was a bit of a troll. Do you know what I'm saying? He's like, I'm going to come so far out of the digital world. I'm going to put this on a real piece of paper. So I think even the way that he wrote that out was genius. But I have to agree with him. If you're looking at the numbers and the data, though, again, only 1% of the world, as of a couple of weeks ago, knew what Web3 or an NFT was. And less than a fraction of that percentage actually own crypto and are familiar with the metaverse, X, Y, and Z. So if he's looking at just his demographic, and if he's the cultural currency of the world right now, I am with him. Why would I waste my time on this? And I get that there's utility and all these things, but when he moved to making clothes with Gap, he did say that he was trying to make his art more accessible. And that was one of the things that he was saying, that I can't always have these big drops that are on runways and really expensive. Because when I was coming up in Chicago, I wanted to look fly, but I couldn't afford Margiela, right? So I think for him, this is more of a stance of where he's at in his life. Even in Easy, he's talking about his kids being rich ass kids. I think he's kind of and he's talking about right now how he's a nomad and his home is in his bag. I think he really is trying to get back into the physical world and spend time with real people. I don't know this to be true. I know a lot of people are detractors of him, but I think as far as his ethos goes right now, he's trying to make a real tangible difference. And I think that NFTs have become the obsession of the rich right now. And it's something that is causing a lot of people to be marginalized. And I think for him, I think that he probably will eventually drop an NFT, but he's waiting for more of the world to catch up to that. And not even because he ever has to wait on the world to catch up. But I think that with a lot of us, we think that it's going to be like this for a really long time until it actually starts to make sense. And I think that, one, it's a great setup for whenever it does happen for him. But two, it's not great for him to spend his time focusing on pushing himself further out in front of people when, to me, he's the front runner in the world right now.
But wouldn't that be an argument, because the people that are really heavily invested in NFTs see this as artist liberation. They see this as the wave of the future. Kanye having so much influence, if he was bought in to NFTs, and if he did adopt them and drop Donda 2 as an NFT or have NFT options, wouldn't that, he always wants to be on the forefront of things. If this is going to be something that is prevalent in the future, isn't this an opportunity to bring his massive audience, using his influence into into.
But that's what I'm saying. Everybody is saying NFTs are the future and this is the most popular thing. For him to say, actually, I'm building real world value with my real fans and doing that, I think a ton of independent artists are going to be like, let me stop trying to find my way out and let me do what I should be doing, which is building real fans. And we had a wonderful comment on my video where I said, I don't really understand the value of NFTs for independent artists. And especially when it comes to the not being exclusive. And he said, what independent artists should be doing right now is building with real fans and growing their worth and their value so that when we do make a full transition into Web3, they're willing to buy anything. And I think that's what Kanye knows, that he can sell anything right now. Like when I was in middle school, he was selling white tees for $100. Like I will not forget that. Kanye knows he can sell anything. I think what he's actually doing is championing because he's been on his independent artist kick for a minute, like artists shit on their masters, these and these. I think it may not be as cognizant, but I think it is that he's like, artists need to grow their value instead of trying to figure out what's next just yet. And I agree.
But I think the language of using real, right? As if, I mean, yes, NFTs are a digital asset, but music right now is digital. And MP3 is digital. Everything is digital. Like, so to say, build in the real world, like people are using NFTs to build real community in the same sense of you stream music or, it's all been digital. So I think people in the NFT space are going to take issue with, you can use NFTs to have real impact if you're saying real as in physical or, changing people's lives. So I think that's the language used with what people
I agree with that. I think the vernacular could have been different, but that could just be ignorance. Even the video I posted, I was speaking out of when I was like, even in the comments, I learned a lot because like my vernacular represented my ignorance on the subject, which I'm completely okay with that. But I'm with him. Like, I get it because he's thinking everything is super digital and there's only digital rewards and there are physical communities, physical things that come from it. So I'm with you. I think the vernacular could have been tweaked a little bit, but I think his overall notion, I 100% agree with. And I think that it may help take the pressure off of some artists who are like, I don't know anything about Web3. Let me rush to do something. And it's like, no, like really just build your audience and then you'll be prepared for it. That's the best preparation for Web3, in my opinion, is building your real audience right now.
Yeah. And that was one of the, I think, most helpful comments that we received was somebody saying, let's get this straight. NFT is not the product. NFT is the process. And so I think the fact that Kanye is even saying what he's saying is a good opportunity for learning, because I'm with Erinn. I don't fully get it yet. I can understand some of it, especially when there's crossover, especially when there's either a physical asset to go along with a digital asset, or there's some kind of practical application, or when even a digital asset is marketed as something transferable. Say, like I did a sponsored post for Mythverse. The way they explained it to me was it made a lot more sense because I learned about the metaverse. I learned about the gaming space in Web3 and how NFTs can transfer into it and how you can, it made it a little more practical. Whereas I think the music NFT space right now is still pretty vague and not too many people have found a way. I mean, if someone did, please leave a comment and give us an example of somebody. And I know there are musicians who are effectively using NFTs in a way that provides value to their fans, but I'm just not familiar with too many of them at this point.
Well, we're supposed to have Latasha on. I think she said we were supposed to have her on today, but I guess she had something going. And then she said, I believe it's the 16th. Yeah, the 16th we'll have her on. So hopefully nothing comes up and we can have the conversation as opposed to us three just kind of, right. None of us have really actually touched the space ourselves. So yeah, Erinn, I know I don't want to close out with, I know you had a topic as well.
I'm cool. We can move it to next week. I think this was I feel represented in this conversation.
Okay. I don't want to be the subject of one of your tweets. I'm just
Yeah. I have to get some stuff off my chest, I can't keep pretending, and I don't pretend, but it's like me distancing myself from everybody in the music industry no longer works for me. It's like, I at least want to let you know why I'm not talking to you anymore at this point, because you don't get it. So let me make you the subject of a tweet.
I feel it. Nah, I mean,
I got to check your Twitter. What's going on?
You gotta
I'm just going in on men right now because a known predator was exposed in the circle, one of the sub circles that I work in. I've known that he couldn't keep it in his pants. A lot of people have known that. And I don't want to make this the subject of this, so I don't mind if you cut this out, but it just,
I wasn't familiar with this cat, but I read about what happened and I seen some people that I know like make a comment about it. But there was feel free. I don't even know how to pronounce his name, but I
don't want to give him any extra space.
Yeah, you don't have to say his name, but I mean, I think it's healthy to talk about what happened, because it seemed like it persists for a pretty long time, right?
So I didn't know about the unsolicited pictures, but I've known for at least 2 years that he is like been unfaithful, right? And this is a guy in the Christian scene. So I don't know what other people's morals are on that, but especially, in Christian culture, that's like very frowned upon. That's been apparent. He's been in the process of a separation and a divorce, and he just makes this post about, hey y'all, I'm getting divorced. He's been in this process for like 2 years, but I figured he made the post. It seemed like he made the post so he could promote new music, because he was like, I don't want anybody saying anything bad about her. We're just two consenting adults who couldn't get along. And the way he painted it, I'm like, this is gross, because I fully know that he's a scumbag, right? So then I just went and tweeted, a lot of your heroes are weirdos, right? Because I feel like that's super weird to make it seem like you're just separating amicably. Like, no, you're a scumbag. Like, you're gross. And all the people that I saw liking the post there's a lot of people who knew his reputation. And I'm like, this is super weird. And he's like, it's all going to come out in the music. Thank you guys for your patience. What I do know is he's been in public with the girlfriend that he cheated on. So I just assumed he's just posting this so that he can post his girlfriend soon. And nobody's like, oh my gosh, where's your wife, right? And so I tweeted that. Then another person that I know in the industry, a woman, a couple minutes later tweeted like, I'm going to make a collage of all of his dick pics. And then the whole internet blew up. And I was grateful, because not even a month ago, I was talking about how men in this scene are never held to accountability because their friends know what they're doing. And if a woman says something, she's completely invalidated. So for hours, people were just invalidating this woman. And then so many people started coming forward and saying things. And then everybody got silent, but it was a lot of men just coming for her, coming for people posting about it. And it was super triggering for me, because I've known that to be my experience. When I've tried to talk about abusers to their face or to other people, I've been told that's not real, or you just have to deal with it, or you got to give them a shot. Like, all of this very sick and toxic stuff. So this weekend was extremely hard for me, and I'm grateful that his label did the right thing in dropping him. I'm grateful that he's off of the tour, because one of my artists was on the tour, and part of our bargaining was that I had to make sure there was another woman on the road with her, because I know his reputation. And I was like really gung-ho about this. And now the label has come back and asked us questions and been like, okay, we're really sorry about the way that y'all have felt. So I think the fallout has led to a good, some good things, but I just had to get some stuff off my chest. Like, I don't care if guys are like, oh, men got to do better. No, you owe me an apology. Don't tweet this and I've told you that I'm uncomfortable around your friends, or don't tweet this when you have been very toxic to me and you've made me uncomfortable, or don't tweet this when your friend harassed me. I told you about it and you said, okay, well, I'm gonna keep working with him, but I'll just leave you out of the negotiation next time. That's crazy to me. For you to now tweet or to retweet me saying men gotta do better, for you to have this sanctimonious, like, so you can look good, you can co-opt what I'm talking about, but you never have to do anything. So I got that because I see a ton of dudes who owe me apologies, tweeting like, yeah, we got to do better. I'm like, how about you do better in private? How about you come say something to me? And I have seen my phone and my computer. There's several apologies that have come in during the time of us even filming. So I think I'm just no longer scared to say anything, because it's like, none of these people pay my bills anymore. I've distanced myself from all of these men who refuse to give me a shot and listen to me. I don't have any ill will. You know what I'm saying? Like, your brother's a scam artist or an asshole or a sexual deviant, and I'm saying something, but I just got to let it go, or it's not that deep. Like, it's not that deep until it's public, or people like my words until it's directed at them. I'm over that. I'm really over that.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we just need more integrity in this world. People let things slide because, there's a part of people that just don't believe what is happening. But then the other part is, if I do say something, it might impact my livelihood in some way, or threaten my relationship in some way, or my money, what have you. And we just have to be better at doing the right thing. And these narcissistic weirdos, like, they'll really do anything to protect their online presence, or to, Hobson included, like, they'll do anything to not be the bad guy. Right. Like, they'll say anything. And because they have the influence, they have fans, they have the power to control the narrative typically. So they're quick to get out in front of it and not be the bad. That's the last thing a narcissistic weirdo wants to be, is blamed for anything, or take responsibility for something bad that's happened. So, without even seeing the post, I can identify with it, and I'm sorry that it's impacted you in this way. And people just need to have more integrity, because I promise you, even if you lose a deal or a relationship, your life will be much happier and healthier if you maintain your integrity.
Yes, 100%.
So,
yeah, I mean, we've seen it in the business so many times. Even there was a producer who said horrible things and was, canceled, whatever that means. People are still on his dick. People just want to. It's this weird psychological thing. Once you buy into the artist's art, it's similar to, I don't. This is an analogy. It's not the same thing, but it's similar to an abusive relationship in the sense that you've already invested so much of yourself into that relationship. It's hard to pull out of it, even if you know it's harmful. With an artist, even when the artist says something terrible, just awful, I mean, inexcusable, or they do something inexcusable, you're so invested in their art because you've been a fan for so, because a fan artist relationship is very deep. It's a profound relationship. It's not just consumerism. It's hard for you to reconcile within yourself that you've been idolizing someone who maybe isn't a great person, and suddenly their actions begin to reflect onto your reputation and your morals, and so you're defending them the same way you would defend yourself. It's crazy to watch. When you kind of lay it all out the way I just did, it seems ridiculous and it seems like a very easy thing to avoid, but clearly it's not.
Yeah, and if you feel like that's your issue and your struggle too, like a lot of men who jumped out like, oh, this is corny, y'all are just trying to make a man look bad. It's like, do you also struggle with this? Are you worried about something from you coming to light? And I can't say that I'm perfect, but when people call shit out about me, I'm like, damn, even if it's not me or my intention, I'm like, I have to know that this is how somebody is perceiving me, and this is the pain that I'm perpetuating in their life. For you to now get defensive and then try to blame me for the issue And that's what I'm going through. That's why I said so. I'm going through that with a lot of dudes. I finally spoke up to a lot of dudes about just different stuff. It's not even like sexual harassment sometimes. It's just like, you do not treat me well. You don't speak to me kindly, or you say this thing all the time around me and it makes me very uncomfortable. And then they want to start a debate. Well, that's just how you feel. I do this because of my culture, the way I grew up, da, 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 da. And it's like, yo, how are you lacking so much self-awareness that it's already hard for a woman to come to a man and say, like, yo, this makes me uncomfortable? And for us to continue to have conversations around it, especially men that I've given so much of myself to, it's really hard. And I think it's super weird when people give people an out because they have a position, but you're standing face to face with the victim saying that they're wrong. Like that absolutely blows my mind. And it's just such a weird, like you said, it's like a weird road to travel down. I don't really understand why that is the fan reaction, like even with the crazy situation that happened in Chicago. I don't even want to utter that dude's name, but for people to be like, well, I just got to separate the art from the artist. What? Like, if this was your family, if this was you, would you want? And I think that because maybe because abuse has been on my front door and because I've seen it happen so often to my friends, maybe I'm more empathetic, but I think it's super weird that you have to have a personal experience with trauma in order to empathize with people. I think that it's so odd that people don't care.
Wow. Well, I mean, I think we're ending the podcast kind of how it started, with talking about emotional intelligence and people just lacking that awareness. So I'm sorry you're dealing with it. That artist seems like a clown. I have no idea. I've never heard of him before. But just the people around him and how people respond to the situation. Even if they don't, hopefully they go away and think about it differently, even if they don't have the courage to say it to your face. So anyway.
All right. Well, appreciate you tuning in.
You want to throw a rainbow out to end it on a
Yes, I do. I want to throw a rainbow out, and I want to say that this month, especially for Black History Month, not because of Black people, but I want you to respect people, care about people, think about how your actions affect other people. The better that you get, the better that the world gets, So let's be self-reflective this month and think about things and think about how to treat people well, but especially those marginalized around you.
That's a great way to end it. All right, Dame, how do they stay up to date on when we go live twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time?
If you don't want to be one of these 7 million artists that are just putting shit on Spotify, not knowing what they're doing, if you want to compete with the smaller million, you got to tap into our session every Monday and Thursday. Text MEC to 844-206-7800. You'll get a text alert right before we go live. Lots of positivity at the MEC. So come rock with us.